Hey everyone, welcome back to another wreath making tutorial. I'm Sharon with Designer DIY. Today we're going to be making this awesome Home Sweet Haunted Home Halloween wreath. You are going to need one wreath form. All the wreath forms we use have 10 pegs on the back and 8 pegs on the top ring. So you just need to know that because that'll tell you like how many ribbons, how much mesh you need, because you'll do it per peg. I have 2 bolts of mesh, 10-inch mesh. You'll need that. And then I have these 5 ribbons I picked out for the bow that I'm going to be making. So pick out 5 different ribbons, and I have 3 that are 1.5 inch, 2 that are 2.5 inch. You just want a variety of sizes, and I placed them in the order I want them to appear on the bow. So the smaller ones obviously are going to be top layers, and then you can add whatever sizes you want as you go towards the back of your bow. So I'm gonna set these aside. You probably only need like 2 yards of each bow, or of each ribbon for the bow. Fray Check. You're going to want this to fray check the edges of your ribbon. All of these things can be found on our website. So we have everything you need. Here's my sign. I'm going to set that out of the way for now. Now for the ribbon for this wreath, I have 2 different groups. I have, we'll say group A, group B. When we go around the wreath, we're going to be putting them in, alternating A, B, A, B, A, B, all the way around. So I have 3 ribbons per grouping, a variety of different widths. You can use just about anything. And I'm going to be cutting 12-inch pieces of the ribbon that's going to go into the wreath form. So I'm going to set this aside because the first thing we're going to do is start cutting all of our mesh. Set my wreath form off out of the way so it doesn't snag. Okay, so you are going to be cutting all of the mesh into 15-inch pieces. So I use a cutting mat because it has the measurements. A lot of times I use a rotary cutter, but don't know where. Let me grab it real quick. It'll go a lot faster. And all these things we have listed on our blog. We have a supply blog that tells you all of our favorite things that we like to use with links on there and where to get them. So we are going to just start cutting all the mesh into 15-inch pieces. Cutting is the longest part of the project. So just keep cutting, just keep cutting. Alright, so I line it up with the edge, find my 15-inch mark, and I cut. Easy peasy. And you are going to do this to both bolts of your mesh. Your lines when you're cutting do not have to be perfectly straight because they are not going to show. So if you don't have to worry about like lining it up perfectly and cutting exactly on the line. None of that matters. You just need to estimate like, oh, hey, about 15 inches I'm going to cut. Don't overthink it. It's supposed to be a fun project, not a stressful one. You can't mess it up. Just keep cutting all the mesh until both rolls are cut. Alright, so I have finished cutting all of the mesh. And I got my wreath form ready. We're going to do the back ring first. So I point all the pegs outward. I make sure there's 2 pieces of pine per peg because we're going to be twisting the mesh on almost like twist ties. So you kind of want to do this ahead of time. Make sure your wreath form isn't missing any pegs, or if any of them are really loose, you can twist them tighter. Much easier to do it before you start. Okay, so for this wreath, I'm going to be ruffling the mesh, and I'm going to use 1 of each color per peg. So let me make some room here. So 1 of each color is going to be going into each peg of your wreath form. So I'm going to start with one, and we're going to be ruffling. So I'm going to slightly curl this cut edge under, and I'm just going to use my fingers to gather it until I almost get to the end, and I'm going to curl that end under. So your cut edges should kind of be rolled underneath where your ruffle is. So it should look like this, and it does not have to be perfect, okay? This wreath is going to be so full, if you don't ruffle it exactly perfect, it's not going to matter. The tricky part here is, since we're doing two colors, I need to ruffle this one while kind of holding this one. So a lot of times I'll hold this in this hand. I'll start the curl that where the cut edge is under, and when I flip it, I'll add it into this hand that's holding this, just like that, and just continue gathering it towards that first mesh that I already ruffled. Get almost to the end, and I'm going to tuck this end under. So you should be able to hold both colors together like this. So this is a black and white border stripe, and this is a lime faux jute mesh, both available on our website. When I put it into the wreath form, I can make this make sense. You're going to twist it on tightly. I'm going to push it down to the frame and I'm going to twist it, but notice that the black and white border stripe is on the outer edge and the lime green is on the inside of the wreath. So twist it on. When I go to my next peg, I'm going to want the lime green on the outer edge and this black and white border stripe on the inside edge. And you're going to alternate back and forth as you go around the wreath. That way it doesn't look like solid black and white all the way around your wreath. It'll be both colors showing. All right, so we're going to go to this next peg here. We're going to grab one of each color, and I'm just going to grab the lime first. It doesn't matter which one, because you can always just turn it in your hand after you make it and put it in the wreath however you want. So we're going to ruffle it, and I kind of just fold it like an accordion. Curl this end under. Grab this mesh. I'm going to start to curl this end kind of under a little bit, and I'm going to add it right into the same hand. I'm going to finish gathering it. Curl this end under, and when I put it in, I'm going to make sure that it's flip-flopped and goes in opposite than the last peg I just did. And I don't want the mesh completely overlapping the previous grouping, so I usually take my hand and I push this up and out of the way when I add this in. That way they kind of bump into each other, and it just gives your wreath more dimension, so it's not like flat. It makes it so it's poofier. So I want them kind of bumping into each other and coming kind of outward. We are going to do this all the way around the back larger ring until it is all filled in. So this next grouping, I'll do lime on the inside edge and then black and white on the outside edge. Gather it. Add it in. Gather this one. I'm going to curl that cut edge under. Push it down nice and close to the frame. You don't want these loose or wiggling. And I give it just a tight turn like a twist tie. And I go to my next grouping. And I keep going around until the back ring is full. All right, so I have finished putting my mesh in the entire back bigger ring. So the next thing is we're going to move to this top center ring, and we are going to be doing the same exact thing in this ring as well. It does not matter what colors you start with or the pattern. You're just going to place it in, and then from whichever direction you place your mesh in, you'll just start alternating from there. It doesn't matter what the bottom ring looks like. So again, grab one of each color, curl one end under, gather it, curl this end under, grab this one, start to curl it under, add it to this one, gather it, curl that cut edge under, and I'm just gonna stick it just directly on here. If I can find my peg, there we go. I'm just gonna twist like a twist tie, give it just one all around good twist. And now we're gonna go to this next grouping. And since that lime is on the inside and the stripe is on the outside, I'm gonna put stripe on the inside and the lime towards the outside on this next grouping. Move it out of my way, roll it. We're gonna gather it, tuck this part under, start to do this curl, add it to this one. I just run my hands down the center of the mesh. Tuck that under. We're gonna stick it right in here. Give it a couple twists. And we're gonna go on to this next peg, and I'm gonna continue doing this step all the way until my front ring is filled. All right, so I have finished putting all the mesh in the front and the back ring. And let me just say, ruffled mesh is my favorite technique because it is super, super full and we haven't even added any ribbon yet. So it makes it easy to use less ribbon in your wreath because it ends up with being really, really, really full without it. But we are going to be adding our sign on next. I like to do this and then add the ribbon. That way I'm not wasting ribbon behind the sign. A lot of our signs have twine or a rope. You can either use that to anchor it in. My favorite thing to do so it doesn't flop at all is to get these mounting squares. It's like a 3M type hook, sticky on this side. And I'll peel the tape off, not the tape, the plastic. And I usually try to put it centered, or actually let me do it a little higher up since it's a vertical sign. If it's horizontal, I do it centered. And you just want to stick that on really, really good onto the back. We have a link to where you could buy these on our website. We have a whole blog post about all the supplies we use. Try to get it so you can see. Stick it on. If, like, we live in Arizona and everything melts, you could always put a little dot of hot glue under the sticker, or a little dot of super glue or Gorilla Glue, just a little bit, just in case this sticker over time starts to peel off. But yeah, so I stick that on, and then I have some fabric covered floral wire. I string that through, and then I just kind of double knot it on so it doesn't go anywhere. You could also use a piece of ribbon, a long pipe cleaner, just about anything. So I just attach the wire directly onto that hook. And I'm going to figure out where I want this on my wreath. And since it is, I don't want it centered because I'm going to be doing a bow off to one side. So I'm going to have it on this side. And I'm just going to run this wire towards the back. Push it down kind of under all the mesh. And I'm going to carefully flip my wreath over. And I'm going to find those two pieces of wire, and I'm just going to tie it pretty snug onto the wreath form, the metal wreath form. Do it pretty snug so that your sign is not flopping at all. I don't even bother cutting these. I just kind of roll them up and leave them because it doesn't matter. You could snip your wire off at the end if you want, but I just tied it like that, and it barely even moves anywhere. I'm going to tuck this twine just kind of behind. And now we are going to get our, I'm actually going to do the bow next and the little ribbon pieces at the end because the bow will cover up a lot of this also. All right, so let's set this wreath aside and get started on the bow. So I am using 5 different ribbons. They're just a mess here. So I have 3 ribbons that are 1.5 inches and 2 that are 2.5 inches. And I am going to, let's see, get the plastic off of this one. I'm going to start with the back of the bow, the largest layer. I'm going to use this awesome graveyard ribbon. I'm actually, let me grab a wire real quick. Use a piece of floral wire to tie it. So what I do is I line up the 2 ends, run my hand down it, so there's a little loop that I created, and I'm going to use it like a slip knot to add each layer onto my bow. I'm actually going to bring my wreath back just for this first layer so I can see how big I want it. So I'm kind of eyeballing it, and then I'll measure it for you guys so you know exactly what we used. Let's see what it ended up being. Let me move this back out of my way. Probably about 1.3 yards. 2 inches shy. Okay, so we're gonna do 1.3 yards. So you do your 1 yard plus another 12 inches, and that is what we are gonna do for all of your pieces of ribbon. So you can cut 1.3 yards of each of your 5 ribbons. All right, so I have cut each of the 5 ribbons into 1.3 yards. I'm gonna grab the bottom ribbon first. I put them in the order I want from bottom to top. So I'm gonna flip these upside down so I can just grab each layer as I make the bow. So we're gonna start with the bottom, and I'm gonna do a 19-inch tail. So I measure out 19 inches, and right here is basically gonna end up being the center of my bow. So I keep my thumb there, and I'm going to make a loop. Now for the loop, I want it to be about 5 inches. So I'm gonna measure out 10 inches on the ruler, and then bring like right at the 10 and where the 0 would be. Bring those together, and that's your first loop. I'm gonna gather it. So I have 1 loop and 1 19-inch tail. Now I have the rest of this ribbon. Again, you can measure it out, or you can eyeball it and just make both of them the same. But you can measure it out. I keep holding the center. The center can go at the 10, and I measure out to the edge of my ruler. And that's when I bring it up. And I kind of add it to my finger where I'm holding it. And I just gather this end with it. And this is going to be just a short spiky that we end up cutting. So you should have loop, loop, 19-inch tail, and then this little random spiky guy up there. Okay, so what you're gonna do, I'm holding towards the center. I take my wire that has the little slip knot loop on top, and I add that into where I'm holding this. Free up this hand. I'm gonna grab the end of the wire. I'm gonna go around the back of the bow, bring the wire through the loop. Both ends of the wire are going through the loop, and I'm gonna pull it tight. And I'm going to kind of make it snug and just do a single knot. And then I'm going to leave this just sitting here, because each additional layer that I make, I'm going to add right onto the top of this one and use the same piece of wire to tie it on. So my next ribbon, I have this purple web ribbon. I am going to make a 19-inch tail again. All the tails for this bow are 19 inches. So you always measure 19 inches, and you know that this is where the center of your bow is going to end up being. So I keep my hand there. I want this tail to go out this side of the bow. So make it knowing like, okay, I'm going to bunch this up, and you might need to switch hands or change the way you're holding it. Because when you're done and you add it on, you want this tail to be the opposite of this one. So I'm going to hold the center. I'm going to measure the 10 inches I need for a loop. I'm going to make the loop, gather it, and then measure out 10 inches here, bring that around, add it in, and I'm going to gather it. The gathering does not need to be perfect. You just want to get it nice and tight for the center so your bow doesn't flop. So it should look like this. Basically the opposite version of this. You place it directly on top. Use the same wire and just tie a little single knot. So as you can see, we have 2 tails now and some loops, and then these little spiky things are super fun. When I am layering these together, as you can see, I'm alternating, like purple loop here, green loop here, purple tail, green tail, purple loop, green loop, purple spike, green spike. I have it kind of rotating. You don't want everything pushed together on one side. All right, pick your next ribbon, and you are going to make, again, a 19-inch tail, but you want the tail to be back on this side of the bow because we're going to be alternating what side the tail is on. So I measure 19 inches, then I measure 10, bring it together. There's my first loop. I measure out 10 inches again, bring that together, gather it, and there's that layer. I hope it's getting easier for you guys. The more layers you do, the easier it'll get. So you take your same wire. I like doing it this way so you're not making all the different layers of your bow and having to hold them all together. Not fun. So this way your hand doesn't cramp up. Set that off to the side. Next layer. This is my favorite ribbon. I love it for every holiday. It's like glitter check, black and white. It's awesome. All right, measure 19 inches, measure 10, make a loop, and I want my tail on this side. Measure 10, bring it in, gather it, and I'm going to add it right on top again. And like I said earlier, you can find all of our ribbon on our website, shopdesignerdiy.com. We also have bow kits for different styles of bows and wreath kits. Last layer, 19 inches, measure the 10, first loop, and I'm going to put my tail that side. Measure 10, bring it over. I'm going to tie it on, and then I do a double knot. And then I am going to bring my wires to the back of the bow. And I'm kind of going to use my hands. I push the layers together snug. So I can tie one more double knot on the back, and all the layers are nice and tight. And then I leave my wire attached because I will use that to add onto my wreath. Okay, so there is your crazy looking smashed up bow. We're gonna fluff it. That's why you always want to use wired ribbons. So tails go down this way. Spikies I always shoot out kind of the top area of the bow, and I just take my hand and I just round out each loop. You just don't want it to be completely flattened. So I kind of spread them out a little bit. I want everything showing. kind of like a circular type of bow, so it doesn't need to be long. You just kind of fluff it up and it's loud and crazy. Okay, now for the tails, you can either, when we add it on the wreath, I'll show you also, you can make it so your bow stays with the tails long like this, and you can split cut your ends, or I still split cut my ends. I'll show you the dovetail cut, but I love curling up the tails, different like lengths, and you just kind of play with it. You add it on your wreath and then you can mess around with it more. You can keep them curled like this, or you can like bring them down. Some people like them actually hanging like a curl. That's why wired ribbon is tons of fun to use. But yeah, so you can do your tails however you want. I'm still going to cut the ends so they're at least finished. All right, so I want the dovetail cut, so I'm gonna fold it in half so the edges of the ribbon are lined up. Here's the crease, and you're gonna cut inward at an angle to make a V. Lots of people, when they are new to bow making or have been making bows for a while, you just get distracted easily. Sometimes you cut this direction and it makes a point. So you just want to be careful before you cut at the right angle so you're making the V cut. So I'm going to cut all these. And we're going to do the same exact thing to the little spikes on top. I cut these about the same size as my loops. However far like the back loop goes out, that's what I want the spikes to be. And some of the front ones I even cut a little bit shorter. So like these ones, for example, I cut them the same length as the loops. So I kind of start with the back ones, cut them, and then as I work my way up to the front, I kind of get a little bit shorter, a little bit shorter. That way they all show. And that is the bow. Once you are done cutting all of your tails, you are going to want to fray check the ends. Fray check, it's like a clear sealer you can put on your ribbons, and it keeps them from fraying. So it's like a clear gel. It kind of comes in out fast. So we always want to put a pin through the lid of it. We don't want to cut it, or else it could make it so the liquid just like pours out all over your ribbon. You just want to do a very thin line of this down just the cut edge. And after like a minute, it dries, it's clear. It works great on fabric, ribbon, does not work on mesh, so don't worry about trying to make your mesh not fray. All mesh will fray. Some you can heat seal and that helps. But this stuff works great on making all of your ribbons last much longer and not get frayed over time. And again, this is available on our website also. If you order one of our wreath kits, sometimes it comes with a bottle of this. It'll last a very long time, so you won't be running out of it anytime soon. Pin back in. Okay, so now I'm going to add this onto my wreath. Bring my wreath back. And I want this bow to be on the opposite side of the wreath than my sign is. So I'm kind of flatten this down a little bit, but I'm going to work my wires to the back just like I did with the sign. And of course I'm going to have to fluff my bow again after, that's fine. why we use wired ribbon. But I'm going to get my wire to the back. I'm going to carefully and gently flip this over. I'm going to tie my bow directly to the wreath form. Nice and snug. Just roll this extra wire up so it's out of the way. Okay. Hope you guys can see. I'm going to fluff this all up. Get everything where I want it. Make sure everything is showing. Now, for the tails, let me make sure you guys can see it. For the tails, you could, since they're so long, you can take one ribbon or two. You could always try gathering and anchoring them in with one of these pieces of pine if you want that like draped down your wreath look. You could leave them all long, or you can curl them, which I do most of the time, or at least curl some of them. What you do with the tails is up to you. I'm going to put my ribbon in my wreath first and then decide what I want to do with my tails. All right, so once you have your bow attached, you can set your wreath back off to the side. And we're going to start with our strips for around the wreath. All right, some of mine are pre-cut, but you want each grouping that you add ribbon into, you want the pieces of ribbon cut into 12-inch pieces. 12-inch pieces. Some of these I already had cut, so it worked out perfect. So let's see here. I am going to cut as I go and add it into the wreath. That way I don't overcut. Or you could count how many pegs are visible and pre-cut your ribbon, but sometimes you end up wasting more that way. Bringing my wreath back again, even though I just moved it. Okay, so we're gonna start with this. Let me slide. 12-inch pieces. So I already have 3 of those cut. I'm just gonna cut a couple of these. 12-inch pieces. If you like to do the dove cut on your ribbon, you might want to cut them at 13 or 14, because sometimes you'll lose length and they'll look really teeny. I'm leaving these ones straight, but if you decide you want to do the V cut, I would probably cut them at 14 inches. Okay, so get organized here. This one with this. Okay, I might have changed my groupings up on you. It's okay. All right, 12-inch pieces. I know I'm at least using 2. Let's cut some of those. I want 3 pieces of ribbon per grouping, per peg. So I'm going to grab, if this was one grouping, I'm going to grab 1 of each of the ribbons. When I am putting my ribbons in, if I have a solid color, I usually put it towards the bottom, not on top of the stack, or else sometimes it looks like a big stripe in the middle of your wreath. You don't want that. So I usually put it in the bottom. So you're going to want to make an X out of 2 ribbons, and then your third ribbon you want to go up and down in the middle. So it's kind of like a star shape. Where your center point is, you want to gather all the ribbons together. You just kind of gather them. Does not have to be perfect. You just want to get this center part really small. I'm going to pick a peg and stick it in. So I'm going to start closest to my bow. I'm going to put this ribbon in, And I'm going to kind of tuck these pines down a little bit so they don't show. And I'm going to fan out the ribbons. Make sure they all show. Some might end up being kind of behind the bow. It's okay. Just fan them out. Fluff again at the very end anyway, so. All right. Next, let's set these aside. My next grouping, let me get some pieces. It's a bit long. This awesome velvet has a stitched edge. So fun. All right, grab one of each. This one towards the bottom. You're gonna make your X, one up and down in the middle, and somewhere near the center, you're just gonna gather across. Just gather it. And you just add it in just like that. You can do these groupings in every peg if you want. Yeah, just keep adding them in. You can add them into the front ring. You can add them into the back ring. Just keep adding until your wreath is the right fullness that you like. I'm going to bring the top of this sign up and over the ribbon a little bit. Kind of fluff these, kind of curl them a little bit. I try to fluff as I go with the ribbon. You could do it at the very end, but sometimes if you do it right the first time, you don't have to redo it. So next I'm going to put some ribbon here in this peg, which is, technically it's a back ring peg. So we're going to grab this first grouping, because I'm going to alternate my ribbon groupings as I go around. That way two groupings that are the same aren't right next to each other. So I'm going to make an X, put one up and down in the middle, gather it, and I'm going to be sticking it in right there in that peg. And after I put them in the peg, I kind of hide the pine branch. It's just personal preference. All right, so make sure it's in good, and I kind of fluff these upward a little because I don't want them flat to where it looks like there's a gap there. So bring them up a little. And now rotate, and I'm gonna put probably some in this peg here that is in the back ring. This top peg here, I'm gonna hide behind the sign. I don't want to put ribbon there because then it's just a waste. All right, so I'm gonna grab one of each of that second grouping that I had done. Cut 12-inch pieces. Make an X, put one up and down in the middle. This damask ribbon is amazing. And it's glittery. All right, so I'm gonna add this ribbon just directly into this back peg here. Twist it in, kind of hide the branches back a little bit, and I'm going to fluff these up a little bit, fan them out. Make sure everything is facing the right direction. So cute. All right, now we're gonna go to the next peg. Again, I'm gonna tuck this top peg under and behind the sign, and I'm gonna add ribbon into the back ring peg that's peeking out from behind the sign. All right, let's see, make sure I'm not messing up. If you don't do the same exact ribbons in every single grouping, totally doesn't matter. As long as obviously every single grouping isn't the same, you're fine. All right, so I'm gonna make an X, and I'll make an X too. Gather it. We're gonna stick it right in here. However much ribbon you use is completely up to you. It's personal preference. You could add ribbon into those top rings if you want. I'm not gonna because they don't really show a whole lot. I'm gonna bring this one up a little bit. Just kind of play with it, make sure everything's showing. All right, working our way down. This front peg is showing a lot more, so I am gonna add some ribbon into this guy right here. And I'm gonna do this one. Takes me a second to figure out what ribbon I used. All right, cut another piece of this. Gather it. And twist, and then I'm gonna hide these pegs. I kind of push them down behind where the ribbon is going to be. Fan everything out. I don't want my sign getting covered by this ribbon, so I'm going to tuck the ribbon kind of behind the edge of the sign. And again, once you hang up your wreath, you can see how everything is going to naturally like hang, and you can kind of fluff. After that, I'm going to add some ribbon into this peg. And we're just going to keep going around until there's a good amount of ribbon spread out. It is right next to this grouping, but since I put this one on top, it'll be fine. I'm not too worried about the two back groupings being the same. All right, so I have that. Let me hold it up real quick because it's kind of hard for me to see from my angle. I think I am going to loop my tails down into this peg here. And I'm gonna bring this ribbon over when I group these together, so there's some green with it. And then these two, I'll probably loop into this peg here. Let's see. So let me stagger them a little like this. I want a decent loop. Find out where you want it to be. And I'm gonna gather across these. And it's cute too because they'll have their little spike almost like these groupings. Okay, and then we're going to twist it just directly into the wreath form. And again, I'm going to kind of hide these black pegs, the pine branches, underneath the ribbon as best I could because I don't want this big chunk of pine just showing. And I'm going to spread all these out, kind of curl them a little bit. And then for this, I'm going to kind of separate them a little so they're not laying exactly over. And I'm gonna gather them and I'm gonna add them directly into this piece of pine. And hide that also. I can fan them out again. Make sure everything's showing. And kind of play with it. So your wreath, you can do just about anything you want. So now that I have tied that in, let me look at it real quick. I'm going to add one more group of ribbon down here into this section here, and then I'm going to be done. So I might mix up my grouping too, just because I have two of this dot right next to each other. So I'm going to grab this one, grab this one. And I'm gonna grab a piece of this one because I used up all of my little purple one. I only had a little bit of that one and I really wanted to use it. Alright, so I'm gonna make my X. One up and down. Gather it. And let's see, there's two pegs that are really close to each other. I'm going to add it in this outer edge one, not this one. Bring everything out and fluff it. I'm going to bring these two together. All right. There you have it. Awesome mesh wreath, sign, a bow. It's going to look amazing on your door. And I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. Make sure to visit our website, www.shopdesignerdiy.com, for all the supplies, and happy crafting!